Well, some new reaction right now to Russian President Vladimir Putin's scathing op-ed in the New York Times, where he blasts the United States over the crisis in Syria and slams American involvement in conflicts around the world. While Mr. Putin goes on to say that his relationship with our president is improving and he's starting to trust him more, he does take a shot at our commander-in-chief and the notion of American exceptionalism, saying, quote, and this is the final paragraph in the op-ed if you've missed it, saying, quote, "It is extremely dangerous to encourage people to see themselves as exceptional, whatever the motivation. There are big countries and small countries, rich and poor, those with long democratic traditions and those still finding their way to democracy. Their policies differ too. We are all different. But when we ask for the Lord's blessings, we must not forget that God created us equal." That's from the Russian president. The lecture is not going over well with some lawmakers here at home, as you can imagine. Senator Bob Menendez, he's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, saying, quote, after reading this, "I almost wanted to vomit. I worry when someone who came up through the KGB tells us what is in our national interest and what is not. It really raises the question of how serious the Russian proposal is." So a lot of emotion surrounding all of this. Fiona Hill is joining us once again, senior fellow in the foreign policy program at the Brookings Institution. She's the co-author of Mr. Putin, Operative in the Kremlin. And she told us last time, I shared a few dinners with Mr. Putin. So we'd like to get your thoughts on this, just in general. Fiona, when you read this op-ed, what did you think?
Well, I was quite amused in some respects because Putin has really done it again, the things that he always wants to do, which is turn everybody else's words back against them. And it's very interesting that he's picked this particular format of the New York Times. It's actually been a very long time since he had an op-ed in the New York Times. I think it's going back to 1999 when he was trying to get the US public attention on Chechnya. And here he is again, fast forward 14 years, trying to get our attention on another civil war, but not in Russia, obviously somewhere else, and then laying out this entire case about why the US policy has been misguided, and establishing and re-establishing again his position that he's had all along, that no one should intervene in civil wars. The last time, of course, he was making sure we weren't going to intervene in his civil war back home in Russia. And as you've pointed out, that very end paragraph is really in many respects the kicker. A lot of the points that he laid out were fairly measured and fair enough. There was stressing the importance of having the resolution at the United Nations and doing this in an international framework and avoiding unilateral action, all things that Russia and many other countries have called for right from the very beginning. But Mr. Putin has made his entire presidency in Russia on the basis of Russia being an exceptional, unique civilization.
Interesting.
So he's denying the United States the right to call itself exceptional in some ways, at the same time that he himself is always stressing the reason that Russia stands alone is because it is unique.
Do you think an American president can make a similar argument right now in a Russian newspaper? Would that even be allowed to be published?
Well, I can imagine that the Russians wouldn't deny publication, but the question was, where would it be published? And the elite in Russia who pay attention to these kinds of things and have some kind of influence on foreign policy is really very small. I mean, Putin really is playing here for a very large group of people in New York and in Washington and across the country who are very much engaged in foreign affairs. He's reaching out to the members of Congress. I don't think that Obama would be able to have the same kind of reach in Russia because the arena there is much more constrained.
It's interesting to note that, just as we continue to talk about this, because it certainly did get our attention. You know, in the same newspaper a day earlier, in the New York Times, Maureen Dowd wrote this column about who do we trust? That's the question that she was raising. And she said, if it were a movie, we'd know it was a trick. And she's talking about Russia getting involved and trying to solve this diplomatically. If it were a movie, we'd know it was a trick. We can't trust the soulless Putin. His Botox has given the former KGB officer even more of a poker face. So that's one take on it, Fiona. The question here is, as far as diplomacy goes, is this completely a hopeless situation when it comes to Russia that, again, if it was a movie we were watching, we know we shouldn't fall for it? Or is it an opportunity, less than ideal, but maybe an opportunity to find some sort of solution in Syria and avoid war ultimately?
Well, I mean, the problem is that we haven't avoided war in Syria. We're in the middle of a massive civil war that is spilling over everywhere else. And I think that just like in the Balkans, back in the 1990s, that there is no really good end game here. You know, we may end up just where we were there in presiding over a carve-over of a former state that has had reverberations across its region. There's no really good end game in Syria that we can look to now, and this is going to be with us for a long time in the future.
So do you think? I don't think. Is it bad? I mean, should we not even involve? Should we not even go for it? I mean, Kerry is meeting with his counterpart right now, his Russian counterpart. Is it worth it to try this? Is there an opportunity, or is it futile?
I don't think it's entirely futile. The thing is, there could be some opportunity, and that's the beauty of the game that Putin has played. He knows that everybody is looking for some kind of negotiated solution, no matter how painful and messy it may be, to avoid some kind of military action that nobody knows where it's going to end up with. Because the problem of conducting a military strike without a clear plan and a clear end game in sight is the one that we've seen in many other settings. And Putin knows this, which is why he's playing out this game diplomatically now, and why he wrote what he did in the New York Times. He is offering us the best solution that we have on the table now in the absence of something else. So I think what we have to do here is go in there with eyes wide open about what this could be and try to see if we can turn this in some positive way. And that's, again, part of the game that Putin is playing. He knows that we have to do this. We're obliged. We cannot stand by and watch this level of depravity and suffering that we see in Syria. The international community overall has to act. The question is, what action do we take and to what end?
And who is the leader in that action ultimately?
Exactly.
And if that matters. Fiona, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks, Jenna. Thank you.